When it comes to fountain pen design, there's a very fine line between pens whose designs are inspired by other pens and those pens designed to be blatant copies. There are, after all, only so many variations you can make on a pen and still consider it to be a pen. And then there are some designs which are these days considered generic enough not to belong to any one particular brand. Think a black cigar-shaped pen with gold trim, for instance. Now, in the past, I've come down pretty hard on pens that are clearly trying to replicate another pen's design. I consider blatant design ripoffs to be, at best, lazy and distasteful. At worst, they can be an illegal infringement of another company's intellectual property. The pen in this review straddles the line between being inspired by and ripping off the design of a classic fountain pen, the Parker 51. The Parker 51 is one of the most popular fountain pens of all time, but it's no longer being made. So, is today's pen review a rip-off pen, or is it an inspired by pen? And most importantly, is it a good writer? We'll tackle all of these questions in today's review. Hello everybody, welcome to this fountain pen review video. My name's Matt, I'm glad to have you back for another one. Before I start, a quick thank you to Kevin Gao who provided the pen for today's review. Kevin, I really do appreciate it, so thank you very much. The pen in question for today's review is from the Chinese manufacturer Hero. Now, Hero's been around since the 1930s, 1931 I believe. They're very well known in China, one of the most popular brands of fountain pen manufacturer there. They have a bunch of models in their line. Some of them are wholly original, but there are several models in their line that are, if not outright copies, certainly inspired by other brands. I reviewed a Hero pen back in season 2, I believe. It was the Hero 9315, which was a very, very close copy of the Parker Sonnet. Even down to they took Parker's trademark arrow-shaped clip to put on the pen. It was a well-made pen. I liked it, but I have a little bit of an issue with design theft. It's not, most people don't care about it, and that's fine. It's something that bothers me a little bit as someone who makes content and who owns a lot of intellectual property of stuff that I've created. Having it copied without permission is not a mark of respect, it's a mark of theft. That's my own personal take on it. Do with that what you will. The pen in question for today's review is the Hero 100 Classic Series. And much like the Hero 9315 I reviewed earlier, it is very close to the venerable Parker 51. Now, the Parker 51 was manufactured for a long time. Bazillions of them were made. They're probably the most popular vintage fountain pen out there. They are no longer being made, however, and so there are a couple of Chinese manufacturers, Hero being probably the most well-known of them, that are, if not outright copying the Parker 51, certainly taking a lot of those design inspirations. And as I mentioned in the review video, there's a very fine line between stealing a design and taking design inspiration. This pen really straddles that line as much as it possibly can. So let's dive into the design. I'll show you what I mean. So this is the Hero 100 Classic Series. It's all made out of metal, kind of a brushed stainless steel finish. Now, the Parker 51 has a jewel on the top of the cap usually. This has a faux jewel. It is just machined into the metal. It's not a separate, inset piece of acrylic or anything like that. There's also no finial. Again, that is just machined in. Instead of putting the Parker arrow clip in, what they've done is kind of gone with a more streamlined, very clean lined version of the clip, which I actually prefer over Parker's clip. It's got a nice kind of ridge right here. Now you'll notice it is a little off center. It's not, directly in line. It's almost like it's a little bit bent, but it's hinged, which is really quite nice. I like hinged clips. The rest of the cap is largely unadorned except for back here where there is a little logo where it says Made in China, and then what I assume is the Hero brand name. It's in Chinese characters, and the number 100. The rest of the pen is largely unadorned, but very much in the shape of the Parker 51. And then again, there is a faux finial on the end here with a faux jewel. So a lot of Parker 51s only had a single jewel. They had a jewel on the cap, but not on the barrel. Such is the case of the Parker 51 that I found in an antique store back in season 1 or 2 and reviewed there. This does take after the double jeweled version of the Parker 51 where there's a jewel down here. Remove the cap, and it's a pull-top cap, and what you get underneath is basically a direct copy of the Parker 51. I mean, if you were to just show this to anybody, they would assume it's a Parker 51. It is very, very, very similar, if not outright an exact copy. So it's a black plastic section, kind of tapers down, very smooth, kind of mid-century modern design feel to it. Got a little itty-bitty hooded nib here that pops out and a little itty-bitty feed. Now, if you look at the feed on this is different than the feed on the Parker 51, but not significantly. This is an aerometric filled pen. So this kind of converter or filling system here is attached to the pen. It's not easily removable. It's just a big metal sleeve with a silicone sac on the inside. At least I believe it's silicone. It is largely see-through. And then this little metal bar which you depress, which compresses the sac, and then you let it go and the sac re-expands, sucking ink up through the nib. I have had a little bit of trouble with this sac. It doesn't do a great job of sucking ink up. I struggled with it a little bit. And I know how to use these kinds of fillers. I've used them several times before, including on my Parker 51, which filled pretty well. I don't like this kind of filling system, and I never really have. It's a pain to clean. Pretty much the only way I was able to get this clean is to fill it with water and flick all the water out, and fill it up with water and flick all the water out, and fill it up with water and flick all the water out over and over and over again, and then fill it up with water 3 or 4 times and set it nib tip down on some paper towels to wick out the water again. And then I got it mostly clean. But this pen is not easily disassemblable, so this is a pen that, in my mind, will be a much better pen for using with the same ink over and over again, rather than changing inks up a lot, because it's not easy to clean this pen. The nib, according to everything I've been able to find online, is supposed to be 14 karat gold, and this certainly is gold colored. This pen is very inexpensive, and I'll get to that when we get to the value piece at the end of the review. And there's no visible hallmarks or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's 14 karat gold, as that's what all marketing materials I have seen have said, but I really don't have a way of verifying that because there's just no visible hallmarks, and this pen is very difficult to take apart. So that is kind of an overview of the design of the Hero 51. I will say that in the hand, it's really quite comfortable. Now, I'm a pen roller. I tend to roll my pen to the side a little bit, but this pen seems to be able to handle that. Hooded nibs generally tend to cause me to roll the nib more because I don't have visual cues as to, yes, this nib is upright. This is kind of a fountain pen for people who want to trick others into thinking they're using a ballpoint. You know, it's got that ballpoint feel to it, or a rollerball feel to it, even though it is technically a fountain pen. So I don't know if any of you have ever seen these on the internet, but there are this set of memes called "You Had One Job," and it's usually a picture of like someone uh, painting a parking strip and doing it completely wrong, and with the caption "You had one job" or something like that. In the world of fountain pens, I use this phrase a lot. You had one job, and that job is to write. If you don't write, you're not really a fountain pen. And while I like the design of this pen and it's very comfortable in the hand, it's a good writer some of the time, but some of the time it's really, really not. So let me show you what I mean. So this pen does have a very fine line. It's on the fine side of fine for a Western nib, but it's not quite all the way to a Japanese style fine. It's very nicely adjusted. It's a good moderate ink flow. I'll show you that here. And it's pretty smooth. It's only got, I'd say, maybe a 3 to 3.5 on the feedback scale. It's no hard starting, no skipping. It's really, it's a pretty nice nib, all things considered. And when it writes, I really do enjoy writing with it. The problem is that this pen has the single worst case of ink starvation I have ever seen in a pen. And now I've cleaned it several times. I've tried several different inks in it, hoping that it would improve, and it just hasn't. And I'm going to go ahead and blame the filling system for this pen. I think that's where the problem is. Either that or the feed, one or the other. So what I saw on this pen was I'd start to write and it would get lighter and the line would get thinner and it would get scratchier and scratchier and scratchier until finally it would just stop altogether. And it only took about 1/2 to 2/3 of a page before the ink would just stop flowing entirely. Because of the filling system, it's not like a converter where you can just twist the piston and prime the feed a little bit. It's this, if you push down on that pressure bar on the aerometric filler, you run the risk of spilling ink all over the place. And so pretty much when that happened, the only thing that I could do regularly was just flick the pen, and usually I'd just open up my back door and flick the pen a couple times to push some ink down to the nib, and then it would write again for another 1/2 to 2/3 of a page. It's hard to tell, but I think what was happening is that there's no air getting back up into the section or into the ink reservoir, or if there is, it's kind of staying in a bubble down at the bottom of the converter instead of coming up to the top, which is where it really should be. So that was a little bit of an issue for me. The other problem that I ran into a lot was this pen dries out very, very quickly. So I would, stop writing, I'd cap the pen, I'd come back 5 or 10 minutes later, and I would have to either flick the pen to get ink flowing again or lick the nib. Now, I don't generally lick the nib, but it was one of the only ways I could really quickly get this writing again, especially if I was, in a public place where I couldn't flick ink all over the ground. In fact, this is the second time I've recorded this video because the first time, in order to get it writing, I licked the pen, turned my tongue blue without realizing it, and then when I went to go edit the video, I was like, I'm gonna have to record this thing because I've got a blue tongue for half the video when it wouldn't start writing. So those two things kind of disappointed me. I was hoping that this could be a pen I could really recommend as a knockabout pen because I like the way it writes when it does write. I like the way it feels in the hand. It's very, very nicely balanced, especially when posted. The balance on this pen when posted is one of the best I've ever seen. Now, is it a good pen? It could be. Really quickly, I always forget to do this, reverse writing. Kind of a nice extra fine, but very dry line, just a little bit scratchy, especially on the side to side, but not too bad. Yeah, and no line variation to speak of. You can kind of coax a little bit of extra ink out on this, but it's not, with most of the nib covered, you're not going to get much in the way of flexion of the tines. So yeah. It's a good writer, but the ink starvation and the quick dry out times limit the areas where I would find a pen like this useful. This is a pen where I guess I could use, shopping, where I'm just going to tick some things off on a list. But if I'm going to sit down and write a long review, I'm not going to go to this pen because the feed just was not able to keep up with the ink flow. So that is a little disappointing on a pen like this, because I was hoping that the quality of construction and the feel in the hand would translate to the writing experience, and unfortunately it just didn't. Now, the Hero 100 Classic Series, this particular pen, goes from anywhere between $25 to $65. I found it for 25 bucks on eBay from a Chinese seller. I found it on a US seller's website for about $65, which I assume is because of, import fees and all of that kind of stuff. For $25, I'd say this is a pen I would be willing to take a risk on. If it writes, and I'm sure that there are others who have had this pen that have written really well, then I think $25 is actually a really good price for this pen. I probably wouldn't spend $65 on it. I think that is too much. Even if this were a really nice writing pen, for a pen that is a copy of a Parker 51, I think 65 bucks is too much, especially when you can probably find a Parker 51 for 65 bucks, a real one that will write better than this. I also, I know that this nib is tiny and there's not a lot of metal in it, but a 20 or a 14 karat gold nib on a $25 pen leaves a big question mark in my mind. Dr. Jonathan Deans from the Pen Economics blog did a really interesting post about why Chinese pens are so cheap. I'd recommend you go read it. It's really kind of a fascinating read. Whether or not this is 14 karat gold, I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me because it's not bouncy at all. There's no additional ink flow as far as I can tell. This behaves just like any other steel nib or rigid gold nib. There's nothing particularly special about the way it writes. So, for 25 bucks, yeah, I would give this a go. Even if it was if it was kind of a dud, which this one sadly is, 25 bucks isn't that much money in the grand scheme of things. And if it writes really well, then you've kind of scored the jackpot. One of the cheapest and best ways to cut down on costs is to cut down on manufacturing or on quality control. So, yeah, I wish I could like this pen more than I do. Unfortunately, this just gave me far too many problems for me to say I highly, highly recommend it. So, that's what it is. In any case, Kevin, again, thank you for sending it to me. I'm sorry I couldn't love it as much as you do, but you gotta review the pen you have. So that's the way that goes. And I'd love to hear from other folks. If you've had a good experience with the Hero 100, leave it in the comments on YouTube or over on penhabit.com in the comments over there. Because, I understand that it's going to be hit or miss with one of these pens. And I know there are people out there who've really liked them. I also know there are people out there who haven't. So I'd love to hear your experiences as well. So as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow on Facebook or on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. I did change my Instagram handle a while back from drchumley to penhabit. So look for me at penhabit on Instagram. And of course, don't forget to head over to the Pen Habit store to check out whatever pens I've got for sale, as well as pick up one of my Inky Fingers notebooks. They're selling well. People really seem to like them. I like them. Of course, I would, because, I helped make them, but, head over there. And of course, if you'd like to support the Pen Habit, you can do so via Patreon, via PayPal, via Venmo, Google Wallet, send me a check, whatever it is you want to do. All of that would be greatly appreciated, and you can find a link to support the Pen Habit down in the description below. So thank you again for watching, and we'll see you here next time on the Pen Habit. Bye.